Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to this edition of Connected by Community, a podcast sponsored by Ballantine Capital Advisors. I'm Brian Ballantine, and I'm joined by Cameron Cannon. We're glad to have you here today, and we have a special guest, Mr. Toby Stansell from Cargo Marketing Agency. Thanks for being here.
I'm glad to be here. Thanks for asking me.
Absolutely. So we were talking a little before we started.
All right.
Hopefully we didn't spill too much of the goods, but some things I don't know, just started to get to know you a little bit. But before we jump into kind of, what you do, what your company does, and your background for our audience, can you just tell us, are you married? You got kids, grandkids? Are you from the area? Maybe a little background?
Yeah, I'm married, been married 43 years.
She's about got you trained.
She does. Two children, 5 grandchildren, and ages from 8 months to 12 years on the grandchildren. But, my family was originally from Oconee County. My dad graduated from Clemson in 1952. He went straight through. He went 3 years, majored in mechanical engineering. I think this is true. I think he graduated third in his class. Oh my. And all his life, he's always bragged saying he had 10 job interviews and 9 job offers. And so he went to work for the Atomic Energy Commission in Oak Ridge, Tennessee at what's called the K-25 plant. Now, he went there 7 years after World War II, but that was the plant that the U-235 uranium was separated from the U-238 uranium, and it was the source of kind of the fuel for one of the 2 atomic bombs that was used in World War II. So really unique environment to grow up in. I always say, don't be born in the city where the atomic bomb was created. But, just in the most advanced public education system in the country, some of the smartest people in the world were there working on America's nuclear program. I had to wear 2 dog tags to school every day in case of nuclear attack, just like in the military.
Oh, my goodness.
Take a foreign language, had to start taking French in the 3rd grade. So, as the Cold War persisted and the need for nuclear weapons began to decline, my dad got in the textile business but didn't come back to the Carolinas, which is kind of the hotbed of the textile industry, but he actually went to Memphis, Tennessee and went to work for a company called American Finishing. So I was born in Oak Ridge, grew up in Memphis, about 2 miles from Elvis' house, and then ended up moving to South Carolina for 1 year. Went to Daniel High School, found Clemson to be literally one of the most friendly places, even though I only lived there for 10 months. And then finished high school in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, and had an academic scholarship to the University of North Carolina, and I turned it down to come back to Clemson.
Oh, wow.
Really?
Primarily just because of the environment, and really not really, I'd say on an educational basis. Maybe that was a immature decision at the point. But over time, my family's come back to their roots. My mom and dad moved back to Oconee County, moved back to within 2 miles of where they were born in Westminster. And then I took my first job in Raleigh and then moved to Greenville in 1978. And I've been here off and on since 78, although I've left 3 times, once to Asheville with IBM, once to Europe to run a marketing business in Europe for a number of years, and then kept an office there for 7 years. And then in Austin, Texas, to help run a software company that we ultimately sold, and then came back here 18 years ago in 2004.
A very non-standard life is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, people have a career. I always say I've really never had a career. I've had a collection of very interesting and loosely connected professional engagements in a lot of different industries, from my first job designing and selling business forms, which was a business that was rapidly going obsolete with the advent of the personal computer, to selling Toyota forklifts, to designing material handling systems, to helping kind of design software for some of the largest capital equipment manufacturers in the world, and then selling software for in the aerospace and defense industry. And if you go see Top Gun Maverick, in that movie, of course, they're flying F-18s. And so the company I was with designed the software that built the F-15, the F-18, the Delta rocket, the Trident submarine, and the Global Hawk, which is the unmanned reconnaissance drone that we still fly in the Middle East today. So and then I got into Tier 1 automotive and dealt with some of the largest automotive suppliers in the world, lived all over the world, and just been an incredible experience. Most of the roles I took on, I really did not know how to do. I ran Ubi here for 5 years, the apparel company. But I read something Richard Branson said one time. He said, listen, if somebody offers you a great opportunity, it's really challenging, it's really interesting to you, but you don't know how to do it, don't say no because you're afraid. Learn to say yes. Figure it out as you go forward. And that's just been one of my mantras for life is, man, learn to say yes. Don't say no because, you think, I don't like that kind of place. I don't like those kind of people. I don't like that kind of job. Unless it's illegal or moral or unethical, learn to have a natural intellectual curiosity and appreciation for everything, and your pace of learning will really accelerate.
That's an awesome attitude. I tell you, that quick little diatribe you just went through, I've already learned a lot. So the first thing I want to ask, because, this is really a focus on community. I'm just curious, what kept bringing you back to this community? I mean, because we see a lot of things in this podcast of awesome things happening out there, but you've gone decades of going all around the world, different organizations, different environments. Something kept bringing you back to this community.
Yeah. Well, I never really intended to leave. When I went to work for IBM in 1981 in Greenville, I was planning on being an IBM account exec or account rep in Greenville. But key account territories back then were rare. In fact, there were 5 key account territories in the Greenville branch, one of which was remote in Asheville. And all 5 of those territories were staffed by IBM key account execs that had at least 13 years tenure at IBM. Well, through a strange set of circumstances, the Asheville territory became vacant. And I tell this, I don't know if this is exactly true, but it's like my uncle used to say, everything I'm telling you is generally true. So this is generally true. But they tried to find an experienced IBM account exec to go run the Asheville territory. And I'd only been at IBM 8 months, and I think they got to the bottom of the barrel, and they didn't have anybody else to ask, and they came to me and said, look, we've got to have somebody in territory to manage that account. We've got 9 very large manufacturing accounts up there. And I said yes, and we moved. And so I never finished my IBM education. I became an IBM account exec after being with IBM for 8 months. So I stayed there for 4 years, ultimately knowing I was going to come back to Greenville, kind of as the price performance curve of technology began to change, performance went through the roof and the prices kept going down. I thought, all the money's not going to be in hardware anymore. It's going to be in software. So I came back. I actually operate out of this building. I was the Eastern Regional Manager for JobScope for 10 years. And so I came back and got in the software business and then got disgruntled, wanted to get out. A gentleman offered me an opportunity, help run a technology marketing company, which I did. And he had in the back of his mind all the time, he knew that I could not turn down a challenge. And after I'd been there about 3 or 4 months, he said, hey, we think we can go global. We'd love for somebody to open a European office. He said, would you and your wife just go take a trip over there and look around? And he could read me like a book, and he knew once I said, man, this is a huge challenge, a great opportunity. So I went to Europe. That business grew so fast. I went over there with 2 other individuals. Within 11 months, we had 52 contractors and full-time employees and sold the business. And so I stayed and helped run it for a while, then came back. So I was over there about 2 years. But then I went to work as vice president of sales for a software company in Los Angeles who had an office in London. So I maintained a presence in London from really 1995 through 2001. But I was going over there about every 6 weeks because I had a sales force that was over there. And our customers, BAE Systems, formerly British Aerospace, and they made the Tornado jet that the Royal Air Force flew. So then I came back and we sold that company. And one of the gentlemen that was running that helped take over a company in Austin, Texas. And he called me and said, hey, I need a vice president of sales. Will you come to Austin? I said, yeah, I'll come. So I did. So just the chance to, see some places that I wanted to see, maybe live in a different environment, different culture than I lived before. But every time, I never really, a lot of times I didn't sell my home in Greenville. I just had this, leash back there that I knew one day you were either going to grow these companies or I was going to change roles or we were going to sell it. And this really was my home base. So emotionally and family-wise, my wife's family was in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. My parents moved back to South Carolina in 1993. My brothers and sisters are somewhere between Greenville and Winston-Salem. So this is always kind of a center of gravity for our family.
So being around the world and around the country, what do you appreciate most about the community?
Well, I came back and I got involved in the Chamber of Commerce, really kind of, and one of the things the Chamber of Commerce does, you have a lot of what I call inter-community leadership visits where you've got leaders from other communities, commercial leaders, cultural leaders, civic leaders, trying to figure out, all right, what does Greenville have that we could adopt? What are the kind of things that are making you successful and making you a really popular destination for people to come and move here? And one of the questions that I would, we'd take mayors and city managers to dinner, and one of the questions they would always ask me, they'd say, listen, what is it there's plenty of 60,000 person cities in America, mid-sized cities in America. What is it that makes Greenville different than other cities that are of a similar size? And I said, the one thing that I can honestly say, and I've been around the world, if you come to Greenville, we'll help you. Even if you're the competition, we'll still help you. There's a kind of camaraderie here that we don't focus on how we compete against each other. We focus on how we complement each other. That's a big challenge. People aren't looking over their shoulder, wondering who's going to take 2% of their market share from them. They're thinking, all right, listen, if it's good for all of us, ultimately that kind of circle of benefits is going to circle back and help me. Let's make sure if somebody's going to bring something to Greenville that's of a commercial value, civic value, cultural value, redeeming social value, let's make sure they get started on solid footing. And for those of us that have been here, let's help them. And I've said, you don't have to be from here. I've kept a list for years called Upstate Influencers. And it's amazing the people that are on that list. Obviously, there are people that have been here for a long time. I've counted Bob Hughes as a friend for a long time, Hughes Development. But there are plenty of people that have come here in the last 15 or 16 years. Craig Brown's a perfect example when he came and brought the Greenville Drive here, I think, in 2006. And I always said, look, if you come here and you're not from here, but you come here with half a brain and a willingness to work, you're in. All right? You're in. You're on the map. You're in the circle of trust. And we're going to all work together to make Greenville a better place to live, work, and play.
And that's probably one of the reasons we're constantly in all these lists of best places to live in the United States. Even I've seen the world. The only thing we got to question is maybe those lists are getting published too much.
Well,
if you've been on Woodruff Road, that's a joke.
Yeah, you can get too popular, but we don't want to be selfish. Right. At the end of the day, growth and prosperity brings challenges, as all things do, and you just got to figure out how to manage it, how to deal with it.
One thing I'd like to mention too is obviously I know you before this as well, and I'm part of the chamber as well on the kind of the young professional side. And he was nice enough to invite us to his office and kind of talk to our group and tell a story as well. So I think one thing that he didn't mention, maybe need to pat yourself on the back for, is he really gives back to the younger, the young professionals and the younger people in the community, whether you're from here or not, which is awesome and shows that you're giving back as well.
Well, I'm writing a book with Forbes right now and I've always resisted writing a book. I'm not fond of self-promotion. I don't like notoriety. I really believe humility is one of the key traits of any great leader. It's not about you. It's about the people around you. And I've taught a class. I used to teach it at Clemson. I don't teach it as much anymore, but it's called The Return on Investment of Authentic Leadership. And it's got one slide in that slide deck says, my legacy of leadership, especially at my stage in life, is not something else that I do or achieve. It's what others become, do, or achieve as a result of any influence I have in their life. And you can say that and not mean it, and people can figure out in 10 minutes it's really all about you. It's not about them. So, for me, it's how do we, one of the greatest things that real authentic leaders do is, they achieve results. They embody the culture of their organization, whether that's a profit or nonprofit. But one of the things, the most important one is real authentic leaders generate new leaders. And so that really has to kind of be it's at the bottom of my list because it's the most important thing. At the end of the day, if everything I do, achieve, or accomplish is all about me, man, when I go into boxing the ground at the end, it all goes with me. But if you've built into the people around you, you've taught them principles, approaches, values, how to solve problems, how to make a difference in the community in which they live, what I call the 3 C's, culturally, civically, and commercially. All that's going to live on after you. It doesn't matter if you get any credit or not. Those kind of principles, and I say the principles that I try to share with the people that are around me meet these 3 criteria: universal, timeless, and objective. Universal, they're not situational. You don't have to figure out, will this work in this situation? They'll always work. They apply to anything that you encounter in life. It's a universally applicable truth or principle or value. They're timeless. They worked yesterday. They'll work today. They'll work tomorrow. And objective. They don't disfavor me because I'm wearing a white shirt and favor you because you're wearing a blue shirt or because our skin color is different. Or we've got a different accent, which I obviously have, or from a different part of the country. So I say, what are those things that are universal, timeless, objective that I can phrase in such a way that they're highly memorable, and when people put them to use, they say, wow, that's better than doing that is better than I did it yesterday. And so that's just been my approach.
And are these things that are going to be in your book? Because I think this sounds really interesting, and I need to get on the list of when this thing comes out, and maybe our audience. So anything else as well? They
are, and I will say, the book's probably got more of a business slant than than I intended it to do. I wanted to write a book. Everybody writes a how-to book. We just go, here's the how-to book on selling, here's the how-to book on culture, and here's the how-to book on organizational health. But the truth is the world is an incredibly diverse, dynamic place, and it's changing all the time. None of us have ever really got a lock on solving all the challenges we think we have because the environment changes so fast. We live in a world that changes so fast, culturally, socially, economically, commercially, technologically, that the optimum solution today, if we say, man, we've got this locked, that's good, we can leave that alone. Every day you walk away from it. Rust is setting in on that thing, the moths are eating, and it's not the optimum solution anymore. So I set out the book, and I wanted the title of the book to be What Not to Do. And it was all the dumb things I'd done in my life, but the really impressionable effect that made on my life and the indelible kind of things that had taught me. Well, when I got hooked up with Forbes, they wanted to have a more positive slant to it. So I got them to agree. The title of the book is Mantras for Excellence, but the subtitle of the book is Leadership Lessons Learned from the Potholes of Life.
I love it.
Yeah, so it's just the principles. I tried to phrase what really it's like a Jimmy Fallon monologue. It's a set of one-liners that are easy to remember, all of which have a real-life story behind them, because people don't remember facts and figures, but they do remember stories. And in that story becomes an aha moment that really becomes, wow, here's the conclusion out of it. Here's the salient truth. Here's that one-liner that anybody can remember, and they all won't resonate with everybody, but some will.
I don't want to give away the book, but what are some of your favorite mantras and one-liners that you've put in there or that you've used, kind of today?
Well, there's a lot of them. I'll tell y'all a story. I brought them. There's 17 pages of them. That's embarrassing. All right.
Sounds like you could book a book on it.
Well, and I didn't do that. I'm going to tell you how this came about because it was not intentional. I got my first smartphone, I think, in 2002 when I went to, and I had a mobile phone before that. But my first smartphone in 2002 when I went to Austin, Texas, I'll never forget, it was a Palm Trio 300. It was silver, and it was a flip phone. Had a tactile keyboard. But the funny thing is that the spring on that phone was defective. Now, they knew it, but they couldn't. They knew they'd change models for that. And about every 300th time you'd use it, that spring would break, and the top would shoot off across the room. And if anybody's in his way, he's going to paralyze them or kill them or something, But I started taking notes. I'd say, man, I'd have a sales call that I'd get, really didn't go the way I thought it would. There's an old saying out of World War I, and you can look it up. Who said it? But no battle plan survives unscathed first contact with the enemy, and that's one of my mantras for excellence. That one I plagiarized, and but out of this, I'd learned these kind of lessons, and I began to write them down in the phone. I just say, man, I don't want to forget that. I heard Bob Parrott, who was a friend of mine one time. He said, "There's an old Southern saying, I know that, but I forgot it." I didn't want to forget these things. I wanted to become part of my personal and professional DNA. So I started writing them down. Now, I knew that my phone was syncing to Outlook, my calendar, my task, my email, and I knew there was a notes section, but I really wasn't paying any attention to it. I was just taking notes, kind of remember now I look on my phone. In about 2004, I decided, I'm going to go look and see all the notes I've taken in Outlook. And I opened up that one note that I'd named. I don't even think I'd named it Mantras for Excellence then, but maybe just Lessons Learned. It was 11 pages long. And so in that 3-year period of 2002 to 2004, I had literally kind of composed 11 pages of one-liners that really became kind of the foundational principles and values for kind of what guided my life personally and professionally. And then because of the way they were phrased, they became easy to share with other people. So, there's a whole lot of them. One of them is sometimes the things a person wants to do the least are the things they ought to do the most. All right? And that's true. The things you dread, the things you don't want to, sometimes the things a person wants to do the least are the things they ought to do the most. And it's just really, how do you transform people from being afraid to do what, the problem with us being leaders is not do we know the right thing to do, is do we have the guts to execute and follow through on the things we know we ought to do. Well, this one's a bad one, but it's true. The best time to fire somebody is probably the first time you think about it. And
that's a tough lesson.
It's a tough lesson. We generally leave people, we know what to do. We just don't want to do the hard things. And the things I say about leaders is what separates real leaders and the really best leaders from somebody else real leaders do the right things all the time, no matter what. None of us do that. We're all hypocrites to a degree. But that's the target. Real leaders do the right things all the time, no matter what. And I don't know why God made it this way, but the right things are usually the hard things. And so it helped me, coin a phrase, do the tough things at the top of the day. And Cameron knows this. I have a little blue book. I never have more than 11 to-dos in a day, never, because most people's to-do list is too long and it's frustrating. But every morning I wake up, and I don't think I've done it today just because I was in a hurry. I was doing this. But I will ask myself this one question. What are the three things that I absolutely, without fail, must complete today that whether anybody knows it or not, are going to make the biggest difference in the operational and financial performance of our company? Must complete, not work on. Those three things. That's why I have this yellow mark. They get highlighted in yellow. Then the next question is, what are the three things and these mostly are on Friday. I leave my personal things on Friday. What are three things that I absolutely, without fail, must complete today that whether anybody ever knows about it or not, are going to make the biggest difference in my faith, my family, and my friends? Those three things get highlighted in yellow. People say, that's pretty simple. That's not that big a deal. And I've stood in front of a number of companies that I've helped lead. And I said, let me ask you something. Let's say we've got 70 employees. We've got 77 or 79 employees. If all of us took that practice every morning, we took stock of what was truly important. What's going to make the biggest difference in my job, my department, my direct reports, or my company? And we highlighted and executed those three things. How many other companies our size do you think are doing the 210 most important things that they could do? 70 times 3 is 210.
Not many.
Not many. And if you will do that consistently with this one over a period of time, you're going to look in the rearview mirror one day and your competition is going to look like a fly. Because that level of self-discipline is what it takes to do what's truly important. So there's a lot of them. One of them is don't defend it, deal with it. Most of the time when something's not working, we want to justify, we need to keep doing this. They're going to make that decision. Don't defend it, deal with it. Fix it or kill it. And there's a lot more. The first one is a long one. It says, in my life, except when I've encountered people with severe physical or mental challenges, and there are plenty of people that have those in their life, and they've got limitations that other people don't. The biggest difference between people who do and people who don't is that people who do simply believe they can. It's not the size of their bank account. It's not their family name or pedigree. It's not the street they live on. It's not the number of degrees behind their name, and it's not their IQ. There's just something in them that says, I can figure this out. And that's what you're looking for in people. You're looking for people that, if you can't hire great, hire one of mine others, and I heard this one from a gentleman, hire great or hire green. Don't hire somebody in the middle. But if you can't afford to hire great, somebody with a proven track record, then you hire green. And Patrick Lencioni said, if you hire green, look for hungry, humble, and smart. Well, I changed that, and I said, I'm looking for IQ. I'm looking for people with intelligence. I'm looking for people with initiative. I'm looking for people with integrity. So if you don't have a proven, you hire people, they got initiative, they got fire in their belly, they'll push themselves to do something. They got intelligence, they'll figure out the right way they do, and they got integrity. When things go wrong, they're not afraid to say and mean. And these are two of my most important mantras, the two most important 5-word phrases that leaders need to learn and mean and live by. It's my fault, blame me. It's not because my mom spanked me too hard when I was 12 years old or somebody held a gun to my head. Guess what? I made the decision with the best data I had available. It didn't work out. It's my fault, blame me. But the second 5-word phrase, I heard from Nate Lipscomb, who worked for the Greenville Drive for many years. He said, look, Toby, he said, you may be the smartest leader in the room. You may have the A+ idea all the time. And he said, you're soliciting ideas from your team. And said, they've got A- or B+ ideas, but they will work. May take 2 days longer and cost $2 more. He said, if even though you got the best idea, if you always do it your way, said over time, you'll demoralize and demotivate the people that work with you. He said, here's 5 of the most important words you'll ever learn in your life. Let's do it your way. And those two are 2 of the most important mantras for excellence that are in that book. Let's do it your way. Because you believe in it, you'll make it work. It doesn't matter if it takes a day longer. Your team's cohesive. You're integrated. You're coordinated. And it just makes a big difference, which points to another mantra, which I says, look, let's learn to major in the 4 C's: communication, collaboration, cooperation, and coordination. And, it's where 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 doesn't equal 4, it equals 6. And just work in close concert with each other. One of my other ones, find the good in people. We all have liabilities. We all have exposures. Let's don't focus on them. That's the common denominator. Let's find the good in people. And there's a long list of them. I can keep going, so I won't bore you with that. But these are principles that if you, again, find the ones that resonate with you and that apply to your situation and adopt them and don't compromise them.
I tell you what, I'm so pumped up. This has got me pumped up because, we hadn't had a chance to meet before this, but a lot of the things you say, I say, you say them a lot better than I do. In fact, I'm going to make my kids read your book.
Okay.
That's a promise.
Okay.
Because a lot of the things you say, I say to them all the time. And I want to hone in on one of them because there's too many for me to right now. Because we were talking about this before, and I think it's an interesting dialogue. And I'm just curious how it relates to your experience in leaderships and successful teams. Let's talk about communication.
Right.
And more importantly, verbal communication and maybe this lost art that we're seeing. How important do you see that in businesses and personal relationships being developed in business for people to be successful on the field and off the field?
It's huge. It's, today, when the email, I said the email was the first form of digital communication I saw in many cases erode from an asset to a liability. And I wrote an article. It bothered me so much. This was in 2014. What happened was I'd tell somebody, hey, this customer's got a late bill, go collect it. So I'd go to the person a week later. I'd go to, our financial clerk, accounts receivable clerk. I'd say, hey, did you, did you talk to that person? What did they say about paying us, the money that they was? Well, I sent them an email a week ago, but I hadn't heard anything from them. And I began to realize that any time that two people were not in exact alignment and you had to have a tough conversation with people, that all the forms of digital textual communication had given everybody an out, just to send somebody some sort of communication that was either easy to ignore or was easy to say, just easy to ignore or come back and say no. And so what I found is that, when two people were not in agreement, that in common ground was not easy to find, that people really avoiding the kind of conversations that needed to take place. And so one of the key things is I came up with a mantra that says, email is good for things you need and good for things is not good for things being negotiated. And so I made it a principle that if I was in an email thread with somebody and we were trying to figure something out or find common ground or reach agreement, and that email thread went more than too deep. In other words, either they wrote two emails, I said, your cell phone's going to ring in 10 seconds. I'm calling you. We're going to work this out in real time. Email is really not a dialogue. Our text is not, it's a serial monologue. You're going to say something, then I'm going to say something. You're going to say, it's terrible at conveying tone or sense of urgency. People act big behind those kind of things. They'll put in bold and underline and, and then when you meet them in real life, say, listen, did you really mean what you just said? Then a lot of people shrink and you really realize they're a pretender. They really don't have real authority and kind of real substance behind what they're communicating, what they're asking you to do. And so, I just said, look, we need to learn to remember people's phone numbers, have real-time phone conversations with people. And today, I actually believe this has now turned into a competitive advantage. COVID made this a huge competitive advantage. When we all had to deal virtually, we couldn't be face-to-face, couldn't be in the same room with each other. Then we Zoom meetings and team meetings and WebEx, that's how we began to do business with each other. And today, literally, you can put IT on remote control. I can fix all your IT problems over the network. I don't have to see you. And when I was president of Acumen IT, I told our guys, I said, look, I know now technology has advanced to the point that we literally can keep people's systems running optimally. They never have to see us. I said, that's all the more reason for them to see you. Because they're going to forget that the reason their system has such good response time and their data's clean and that everything works well is that we're the people behind the curtain that are making that happen. And if they don't see your face from time to time, they're going to think it just happens automatically, and it doesn't. And so today, when we can do everything virtually or remotely, it is a huge competitive advantage to take the time, to be old school a little bit, to go see customers, to spend some time with them, as long as you're not putting anybody at health risk. And so I'm going to Atlanta on August the 3rd and 4th. Really, and these people are in Atlanta. I talked to them. I'm going, listen, is there any agenda? Not really. It's just to know, guess what? We really do care about you. There really is somebody behind the curtain that's working on your behalf. I owe it to you to ask you what's changed in your business, what's important today. What are we doing well? What's working well? What are we not doing well? One of my mantras is make it easy for your customers to tell you what you don't want to hear. I'm going there to make it easy for them to tell me what I don't want to hear. That's the only way that you improve. And so if the interpersonal communication, not being afraid, realize that you have to work at finding that common ground, finding that solution. I heard this a long time ago. I don't know who told me this. It's not my mantra. But there's a saying that the test of a truly great negotiation is that neither party gets exactly what they want. And let me tell you something. I have found that the strongest business relationships and personal relationships that I've ever had in my life were the outcome of sometimes going through some very intense struggles where we had to work to figure this out. But going through that valley of conflict with those individuals on the other side created two things that are at the cornerstones of every long-term relationship, personal or professional: trust and respect. You don't have to agree with me, but if you can follow my logic and we trust and respect each other, that's the foundation for a long-term relationship.
Man, I'm pumped up.
I am too.
Goodness.
I got to tell you, so it's funny. I got the same two back and forth rule too.
Exact
same. Yes,
that's great.
And
well, they're universal.
Because
they
after
fit.
that, we're debating, and debate is not what email is, or text, or in debate or negotiation or whatever. And yeah, you don't want tone, dialect, and all these things to be misconstrued. And so I say that all the time. And I think, I want to stress to both the young community out there, the younger folks at our office, how important that is. And I know they hear that from me. So I'm glad to hear other folks doing the same thing. Yeah. And certainly even try to my children, tell them, consider maybe even minoring in communication, because I think no matter what young folks and young professionals do, it's going to be a competitive advantage for the rest of their life.
It is. I want to even send a proposal to a customer. What I do is when we craft a proposal, we put, and you can do this in Microsoft Word, you put a draft watermark on each page.
Yep.
And I'll schedule a time with a customer and say, look, at this stage, this is still collaborative. I could have misheard what's really important to you. I could have prioritized things wrong. Your budget may be different from what we think. What I like to do is let's schedule a session. Let's go through this together. And that way you can kind of make sure that the final shape that this proposal takes really fits what you're trying to achieve. What are the primary business objectives? It fits your budget, the level of effort you understand, your duration or timeline. And it's a process. So they're participating with you. Yes, is that an extra step? Does it take time? Does it take a... But when they get through, guess what? That's their proposal, not yours. Because they've helped craft
they own it.
The final form of that. And it's just those extra steps that people take that really make the difference in success or failure, personally and professionally. And so you just got to be willing to have dialogue with people.
Yep.
That's it. Just have real dialogue. Dialogue is, it's got starts and stops, and it's not smooth, and people interrupt, but it's real.
Yep.
And it's effective.
Yeah, that's one thing I like too that you just kind of sparked my thought on is with dialogue, like especially with young people, they're always on their phone, and I'm part of that as well. But
right.
But with dialogue, I love that you said that it's not going to be perfect.
No,
I think that's one reason why even not just young people in general, they rather do an email, because you can craft it so perfectly, like you said, where you're behind it, whether you bold a word that you didn't have courage to say in person or whatever. Whereas if you're in person, you're getting the full thing. Like you're thinking on your feet. You might do a hiccup, might say the wrong word, but it is real. And I think that's one thing that you hit on that's very important.
And here's the other thing: if you just send an email with a message, you don't know how it's going to land. You're not there to mitigate the response. You may have thought we were being very positive, but the recipient on the other end may take it as negative. And so I still use digital communication, written communication all the time, but I use it to confirm what I said verbally.
Absolutely.
I say, hey, appreciate the conversation. I did one this morning. Appreciate the follow-up to yesterday's phone call with an attorney. Here's the things we talked about. Here's my perception of what we agreed on. Here's the background material that you need to be able to proceed, and here's what I'm expecting from you. And so here's the content and timing of next steps. But we talked about it in real time. So I'm not surprising this person. And that's really important. If you're not having a real-time conversation with somebody, you may think you know how they're going to respond to the communication that one-way communication you sent, but you're not sure. And if you're not there in real time, you can't adequately adjust or listen to their tone or listen, are they pushing back, so that y'all can find the common ground sooner rather than later.
So let me change directions for a second. And we may not have a ton of time to go far in this, but for our audience, what kind of things are you working on now with Cargo, and what's Cargo doing for our community? We talked a little bit about even just some of the where your office is and how you are growing. Can you just talk about that for a bit?
Yeah, I think we were positioned as, at the intersection of academy and Academy and Pendleton Street. That's just a huge opportunity there for redevelopment. Those are communities that were largely textile-centric for years. My dad retired as vice president of engineering for a Fortune 500 textile company. I grew up working in a textile mill. By the time I was 16 years old, I was doffing cloth and hanging warp beams and driving forklifts. But as you watched, we price and cost became such a factor that we moved all that offshore. There's a lot of fabrics that are made in the United States these days, but most of them are non-apparel fabrics. They're for industrial use. And so, when you didn't backfill into those communities with other jobs, especially jobs where we didn't train the workforce, educate the people, then you had a high level of poverty that really is almost unfathomable. In fact, I hadn't looked at the numbers recently, but Greenville is one of the most what I call economically dichotomous cities in the South. The distance between the haves and have-nots is really big, and ability to experience economic mobility, to move out of the economic strata that I am, it's really challenging here. So where we sit as a building, looking at South and West Greenville, there's a great opportunity for redevelopment down there. So our first role is to employ people, to have people that eat lunch over there in those restaurants, to go into West Greenville to, eat at the Woodside Bistro and Coastal Crust. There's a lot of restaurants and a lot of places over there. But anyway, make sure that we're being patrons of our local businesses. But secondly, is to think about today, you can't just think about your business. What about your upstream suppliers, the people that you purchase products and services from, and your downstream customers? How do we then have what I call a concentric circle of commerce where we place maybe a little extra emphasis on how do we do business with people around us? How do we, and also how do we, everybody's big on automation. I spent most of my life in technology. But the best thing we can do in a lot of our communities, this first step, is not to bring an automated plant in there that needs 2 people, is to put people to work. How do we promote and help propose and even do business with businesses that they're fairly manual, but they need people to do the work, and that puts money in people's pockets. So I'm always thinking every day, what do we do? Obviously, we've got to be successful from a commercial standpoint, but civically and culturally, how do we make sure that we're being good, a good community citizen around us? Are there suppliers that we can use locally? If we need to expand our building, how do we make sure we kind of stay in that same general area we are today? Let's do what we can to just improve the economics and quality of life, for that area of Greenville. So that's our focus. Now, our customers are all over the world. Our customers are mostly Fortune 500 companies, so I can't dictate where they are and where they locate. We certainly can dictate how we spend our money locally and kind of where we devote our time and attention.
And you guys had a lot of success, a lot of growth. And
yeah. It's I came to Cargo, and it's challenging. The macroeconomic conditions that are in place today are challenging. People don't think about this, but if you think about it, with inflation, the latest CPI number is 9.1%. And a lot of companies they make products, they make computers, and they make tires, and but all of us are thinking now, wow, if the price of replacing something I have is going up, I need to get it to last a little longer. And so you think, well, how do I get our part of the leadership I need to provide to my customers? How do they shift some of their revenue stream from new product sales into service sales? Since people say, wow, I'm not going to replace my technology every 3 years right now, I'm going to replace it every 4 years because I believe longer term prices will come back down. And so, we've tried to not just be an ad agency or marketing consultancy that takes the products and services that a company already has and figure out how do we promote them to the market, but how do we look into their supply chain? With supply chain constraints today, how do we make sure we figure out what they can build or what they can buy so we're promoting products they can actually deliver? If you went to promote a lot of vehicles over the last 2 years, you can have all the ad campaigns you want. They go a lot. There's nothing sitting there. So now marketers have to be experts at not just promotion and ads and graphics and video and the metaverse. We got to understand what can we buy and what can we build and what's the best way to get to the market through distribution network. And for us, we focus on helping big brands connect with their small business customers. And we say that we help big brands or compelling brands market and sell to small business. But said another way, we're going to help you identify, secure, grow, and keep the small business clients you really want, whether that's a large global community of end user companies or whether that's a distributor, dealer, broker network that becomes the final link between you and the end user of your product and service. We know why those people buy. We know what motivates them. We know why they'll sell your product over somebody else's, and we can help increase average transaction value, customer lifetime value, decrease customer churn, increase geographical reach. So we're very specific on how we help big brands connect and grow their small business clients.
Awesome.
So we're at 77 people today, or maybe even 79. We've hired 5 in the last 2 weeks. And when I came there 18 months ago today, this is my 18-month anniversary, we had 32 people.
Wow.
Oh, my.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, certainly you've done a lot of great things in your career, in the community, and certainly on this podcast, Connected by Community, we want to thank you.
You're welcome.
I know we've learned a lot. Looking forward to the book, but I know Cameron wants to ask one more question before we let you get out of here.
Sure.
So we always try to ask a signature question, which you've kind of alluded to already. But what makes you tick?
I think for me, it's just it's building that kind of next generation of leadership. It really is. It really it sounds corny. It sounds self-serving, but just help people expand their sphere of influence. I say good leaders give up their roles before they're asked to. Good leaders give up their roles before they're asked to. In other words, we made a bunch of promotions in April. People that probably weren't fully qualified to do the job, but we're going to throw them in the deep end of the pool. We're going to throw them in the briar patch. And one of the things I say about leaders, I gave you some of them, they generate new leaders. But if you're going to develop new leaders, you have to be willing to tolerate a reasonable degree of failure. So how do I create that balance of fear and opportunity for these new leaders, put in place they're not fully equipped to do? But then I owe it to them to meet with them on a regular basis and say, hey, how you doing? Here's some principles you can apply. Here's some simple things. So I say that for me, the thing that really turns my crank is to be able to kind of fade into the background over time. And people say, well, I'd rather see you than say. I said, yeah, I know, but listen, they're going to do fine. You just got to give them a little runway. And just as Jim Collins wrote in Good to Great, which is now 21 years old, that's copyrighted in 2001, is that I don't want to be a shining star with 1,000 helpers. I want to be a level 5 leader. Intense professional will. I want to win. I want to win the right way. Extreme personal humility. It's not about me. It's about you. So what really, just like doing this today, I met you, Cameron, it's really about, man, how do you motivate, inspire, teach? I'd say I'm really not a CEO. I'm a teacher. Teach others so that they can extend what we want to extend in Greenville community from every aspect: community engagement, commerce, industry, culture, and just inspire and teach others that, hey, you really can be something beyond what you imagine, how the ordinary people generate extraordinary results. Ken Blanchard wrote The 1 Minute Manager. He had one of the greatest sayings. He said, almost all people are potential winners. Some people are disguised as losers. Don't be fooled.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I know I'm pumped up, and for our audience out there, how would they find your book? When's it going to come out? If you don't mind sharing that, how they'd be on the lookout for that.
It'll be in Q4. I'm editing the final 5 chapters. It was due yesterday, so I'm a day late. The final five chapters right now. It'll be a Q4 release. There's a book promotion plan, and it involves distribution to all your major booksellers and through Amazon and others. So it'll become clear over the next 3 or 4 months, and people know how to get it. Certainly, they can contact me, and it's really not about the book. The book is, if it helps. I said I'll write the book if it helps people. I really don't care if I get any money out of it. You can even use somebody else's name, but does it accelerate people's ability to be a quality leader sooner because they don't have to learn things through negative experiences? And increases their sphere of influence.
Well, that's awesome. Well, thanks again for joining us. I learned a lot, and I'm going to be looking forward to that book and hear more about how it impacts people's life and your experiences. So again, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
And thanks for everyone for joining us for this edition of Connected by Community. Until we see you next time, go out and make our community great.